Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to use the power of material, displacement and other procedural nodes to make this procedural grass material. I'll get started by adding the two objects I'm going to apply the material. But to do that I'm going to need to delete my default cube. So I'll left click it and then press X to delete. Then I'm going to press Shift and then the A key and left click plane. Then I'm going to press Shift and then A again and I'm going to left click UV sphere. Since I'm going to want a couple of objects to display my material on, I'll press G and X to move my sphere along. Then in my timeline I'm going to change it to the shader editor so we can get started with making this material. I'll also left click my sphere, right click and shade smooth. I'm then going to press plus new and I'm going to call this material grass. Now before I continue I'm going to press Ctrl and then S to save the file. I'll then left click my UV sphere, left click this drop down here and select grass. I'm going to drag up my shader editor a bit and zoom into my objects here. For now I'm going to left click my viewport shading just so we get a rough idea of what we're doing here. I'll zoom into my principal BSDF node which we're going to keep. I'll then press Shift A, then under texture I'll left click noise texture. If you have the node wrangler you can just left click this node and press Ctrl T, but for us I'm just going to press Shift A, then under input and I'll add the texture coordinate node. And I'm going to plug in my generated for this tutorial. I'm then going to plug my factor into the surface so we can see what it looks like. This is what we're going to be using to tell Blender's displacement node which parts of the object need to be blades of grass pointing up and which ones need to be completely flat and on the ground. To learn more about displacement I recommend checking out this video here. But essentially the areas that are closer to white will be going upwards and the areas that are closer to black will be flat. That's because white represents the number 1 and black represents the number 0 and shades of grey make up the in-between. I'm going to set it to a scale of 150, that way we can have loads of blades of grass. You can see loads of tiny dots, but to see it a bit clearer we're going to need to use a color ramp to make a better contrast. So I'll press Shift A, then I'm going to search for color ramp. Then I'm just going to plug it in between factor and the surface. Then I'm going to drag this all the way out till it gets to around 0.6. Now if I zoom in on my object, you can see that these little white dots are where the grass is going to come out from. For now though, I'm going to plug my BSDF back into the surface. And you can see we've got plain output, and that's perfectly normal. I'll press Shift A, and then under vector, I'm going to left click displacement. And then I'm going to plug my color ramp into the height of this displacement. I'll also set my mid-level to 0. And I'll plug this into the displacement. Now you can see those little dots are now poking upwards. And the reason they're not going really high like grass is because before we enable displacement properly, the displacement node will act just like a bump node. I'm going to bring these two nodes together, the color ramp and the displacement. I'll then press Shift to select the displacement node with my color ramp, and I'm going to press Ctrl J, and that's going to create a new frame. I want to label this frame displacement. This will help us keep the node organized. I'll also change the color to maybe a nice purple. There. I'm then going to drag my two noise texture and texture coordinate nodes outwards. So let's see if we can get this displacement to work. So I'm going to zoom out on my 3D viewports, and first we're going to need to make sure we're in cycles, since shader node displacement is cycles only. You'll need to bake your displacement into a texture in order to use it in Eevee with a displacement modifier. If you want to learn how to bake displacement maps, I recommend watching this video here, and the bump and displacement node video, which I mentioned earlier, will explain how to use displacement maps with a displacement modifier. I'll then left click my material properties. Under settings in my grass material, I'm going to change it from bump only to displacement only. I'm going to choose displacement only for a slightly higher quality result. As you can see, nothing has changed, and that's because we don't have enough geometry. So first I'm going to start with my plane, so I'll left click it, then in my modifier properties, I'm going to add some geometry using a subdivision surface modifier. I'll press add modifier, and then I'm going to left click subdivision surface. I'll change it from Catmull Clark to simple, and we need to enable an option called adaptive subdivision. But to do that, we need to go into our render properties and change our feature set from supported to experimental. Then you can enable your adaptive subdivision. I'll change my Dyson scale to 0.2, and I'll change my levels to the number 3. And in order to see our displacement changes, we're going to need to go into the render preview. So I'll left click this button. You can see the lighting is pretty poor in this scene, so I'm going to need to add an HDRI. So in my world properties, if you don't have something here, you can just press the plus new, and I'm going to left click this yellow dot and change it to environment texture. And now I'm going to add my environment texture. So I'm going to press open, and I'm going to get the HDR file from my downloads, which is from a free resource called Polyhaven. And they're a great site. They provide loads of free HDRIs. So I highly recommend checking them out. Once I've added my HDRI, you can see things are looking a bit better. But just so we can focus on our material, I'm going to come to my render properties, then I'm going to to scroll down, then under film, I'll left click the transparent, and now you can see our displacement is starting to work. I'm then going to left click my sphere, and we're going to need to add a subdivision surface modifier to that one as well. So I'm going to left click my modifiers panel, then under add modifier, I'm going to left click subdivision surface. I'll change it to simple, and then I'm going to enable adaptive subdivision. I'll change my dicing scale to 0.2, and I'll change my levels viewport to 2, since the sphere already has a bit more geometry than plane, so it won't need the levels viewport 3. Now we have our grass working. We're going to want to change the length of the grass a bit since it's a little bit long. In my scale, in my displacement node, I'm going to change it from 1 to 0.5. Next up, we're going to need to add some color to our shader. So I'm going to left click this color ramp node here in the displacement and press Shift D, and then I'm going to right click it and press remove from frame. I'll then plug the factor of my noise texture into the factor of the color ramp, and then the color ramp into the base color. Now, as you might imagine, we're going to want the black part of this color ramp to represent the mud or the ground. But to sharpen it up, since it's making a bit of a gradient, I'm going to want to pull the white part of our color ramp closer to the black one. Now I've just moved it until we've got a nice contrast between the two, and we can clearly see where the grass is and where the ground is. Once that's done, all we have to do is alter the colors. So I'll start off by left clicking this black slider, and I'm just going to change this color to my brown. If you want to get the exact same color as me, I use the hex value of 201 followed by 60F. Once you've typed in that number, you can just press enter. Alternatively, you can just create your own brown color, or any color you like. Then to select my white slider, I'm just going to left click this arrow here to move to the next slider on the color ramp. Then I'll left click the white bar, and I'm going to change my hexadecimal value to this green color I've made earlier. And I just went for 6B7247. Or alternatively, you can just create your own green color. I'm also going to change the roughness of my noise texture to something a bit lower. So I'll go for something around 0.27. To finish off though, we're going to need to create a roughness using the noise texture, since having a roughness of 0.5 on everything doesn't make much sense, since the grass will be a lot more reflective than the mud. So I'm going to left click my color ramp on my displacement node, press Shift D, then you can press Alt P to separate it, and I'm going to plug the factor of my noise texture into the color ramp. Remember, for roughness, the areas that are black will be closer to 0, so super reflective, and the areas closer to white will be a lot more rough and less reflective. Similar to the base color, I'm going to bring these quite close together, and I'm going to make my black one close to white, since this will be representing the mud, which will be much rougher than the grass. Around here on the slider should do nicely. I'll then press the arrow key on the color ramp to move to the next slider, left click the color, and for this one, since it'll be representing the grass, which is much more reflective, I'm going to choose a much darker color. Around just below the middle should do nicely. Then to apply our roughness effect, all we need to do is plug the color into the roughness of our BSDF, and now our grass should have proper reflectivity as well. And yeah, there we have it. That's how we can make grass using just the procedural nodes in Blender. Thank you all very much for watching, and if you did enjoy it, you can support the channel by liking the video, subscribing, or sharing it with someone who you think would find it useful. And if you want to, you can also donate to the channel using the YouTube thanks feature. But all types of support are greatly appreciated. If you do have any questions, please feel free to let me know in the comments below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But with that, I'd like to thank you all very much for watching again, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.